for English language learners. I'm here today with Teresa Lopetrone.
Hello.
So this is our contact information. If you're looking for us after, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. We are always happy to email or chat or stop into your room and see how things are going. If you have questions during this session, please feel free to use the chat box, or you can raise your hand and ask your question through your audio.
All right.
So often teachers ask, how do I know what the step level is for my ELL student in my classroom? So there's a couple ways to find out. Usually it's on your class list, or you can ask your school secretary or resource teacher to check in Trillium. It should be there if they have had an assessment. And then if your student has been assessed this year, the initial assessment will also be your tracking sheet. Otherwise, we have the STEP Continuum or ELL Continuum on the portal ready to download for you so that you can update it for your student.
And for the LKDSB, we do have the purple sheet, which is in the OSR, that should say which step they're on. So you can always check tracking sheet. So you can always check the OSR as well.
Mm-hmm. So there's two programs of study for our English language learners, ESL and ELD. This will be determined as part of the initial assessment. So this information will also be in Trillium if you're looking at which continua to download. So again, check in Trillium, check the purple sheet, or check your class list because it should be on there whether they are ESL or ELD. Go ahead, Teresa.
So here is the STEP Continuum. This is a reassessment, right? Is that right, Stef?
This is the ongoing.
The ongoing. So we can take a, I'm going to be working with this soon with another student that I've formally assessed just to see where they're at now. Sometimes they move schools and it gets lost in the shuffle. So if anyone has questions, you can call us. We can come back in and do not another assessment, but we can look at this together and figure out where they're at.
And you're also welcome to use this on your own. You can just download it from our portal page, and then you can go through and highlight where you see the students have these skills consistently. And then it can also give you an idea of the next step of where they're headed.
Right.
Mm-hmm. We do want to remind you that it's a lens to look at the whole curriculum. So because we have oral reading and writing elements in all of our subjects in the curriculum, you can use this to plan how you are going to deliver content to your ELLs.
Ryan Smith to the office, please. Ryan Smith to the office.
So if you think about oral reading and writing in science, in social studies, in math, this is for all the subjects, not just language.
Right. So in steps, if our students fall between a step 1 and 3, these students, their program, they do not need an IEP, and you can modify their program. This question comes up all the time. If on the assessment, and especially the initial assessment, we'll let you know, it says right on there, if they fall between a step 1 and 3, feel free to modify their program. What does modifications look like? We're going to get to that. You may be changing, actually change the overall expectation, or you just make the content, sorry, I have my notes here, content easier for them to follow along. And
it's important to remember that the reason that we don't have an IEP in place and we don't require that is because these supports are temporary while they are acquiring language. And as they acquire more language, these supports will fade in time. So they are able to have modifications, but they won't need modifications forever.
Right.
So steps 4 to 6, they may still need accommodations. We have talked to quite a few of our ELLs, and they've brought up the fact that they still spend time translating in their head for some tasks that they're working on. So they may still need things like extra time or pre-teaching vocabulary, those types of accommodations to help them, even though they are approaching grade level or completely fluent.
Right. So we're just helping them understand the content. We want to give them all the tools that they need to be successful.
Mm-hmm. So this is always an interesting thing to think about when we're talking about our English language learners. Our English speaking kindergarten students come to school with between 1,200 and 5,000 words that they understand, not necessarily that they are producing. And then every year at school, they add approximately 1,000 more words. So if you think about our ELLs coming into school, coming into grade 3, how many thousands of words they are behind. So they are chasing that moving target the whole time, trying to catch up with their English speaking peers.
So this is why we always push to the vocabulary, pre-teaching vocabulary and having word banks for our students, because they need them. They need it to comprehend what they're learning.
That's a lot of words.
A lot of words. So fluency in a second language can take up to 5 to 7 years, and longer for our ELD kids, which this question comes up a lot. A lot of people think, oh, they've been here for 4 years, they should know this by now. But it takes, just like you saw, those words that they need to catch up with, it's going to take a while, and we got to give them that time. And academic language is so different from our everyday language that they may be missing out on a lot of the pieces.
And so our kids come in, and the first 1 to 2 years, they pick up all of that basic vocabulary that they're using in the schoolyard and talking about familiar things and all of those things. And then we don't realize how big that gap is between that basic language and then all the academic low frequency vocabulary that they also have to consolidate when they're learning that second language in concert with the curriculum.
Right.
We like reading.
Yeah, everyone likes it. Reading is very important for our students, to hear it, to hear proper vocabulary, to hear the language, to better their understanding, to better their comprehension. The most important piece here is to make sure that they're reading things at their level or giving them opportunity. Me and Stef were having this conversation how when we do our initial assessments, most of our kids can decode. They don't know what they're reading, but they're able to decode. Well, decoding doesn't mean comprehension, so which can trick you as well.
Mm-hmm. I gave the example of me reading a book about, quantum physics, which I can probably decode, but I might not be able to understand.
Right.
So taking into account where they're at and what the vocabulary needs are, where they are, depending on like how much language they have, figuring out what pieces they need and what books and reading materials might best help them acquire vocabulary at the level where they are.
Right. And Google Read and Write, for us in our board, we have that option for everybody. So I've been encouraging where it's possible. I know technology is not always available, but where it is, be a great tool to use to have the kids listen to a material, but also listen back what they've written, which is important for all students.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So some general strategies that we always recommend coming into rooms when teachers have questions is provide an alphabet model if your child doesn't use or comes from a language that doesn't use the Latin or Roman alphabet that we use in English, and also a number model, because we often think that math is the universal language, but our numbers are not necessarily the numbers that are used in other languages. So providing a model for that as well can be quite helpful.
Mm. And
then visuals and gestures to support concrete materials that you can show them what it is that we're working with and what we're doing. Helpful partners are always nice. Kids that will help them but not do it for them. And then being careful, because as teachers we often talk a lot and we talk fast, and if we can just slow it down and decrease the amount of words in our sentences, and also make sure that we're not using any of those expressions, because kids will get really caught up in what it is that you're trying to say when it doesn't actually sound like what it means.
And simplifying our written and oral when we're speaking to kids. We are always, like you said, we're using language that's a bit above. So if we can simplify our language when speaking, and even written, it's so much better for them.
My favorite was I was with some kids at a school and we were walking down the hallway and it was pouring rain outside. And I said to them, "Oh my goodness, it's pouring out." And they're like, "Oh, Miss Wood, it's raining." I'm like, "Yep, you're right, it's raining." Because that doesn't make any sense. We don't pour rain from the sky, but just being aware of those things.
All right, so what are accommodations? Well, we do accommodations as teachers all the time. You're not even noticing you're doing them because they're so natural. So giving the supports, visuals, we're not altering the curriculum here. We're just giving them the tools that they need to support them in getting understanding what is being taught or what they're learning.
And a lot of these teachers are already doing.
Right. Yeah, we're just trying to help improve their English. So whatever we can do, the tools we can use in the accommodations here, this is the time.
So they can understand the content. Mm-hmm. So we talk a lot about scaffolding, and then sometimes people are like, well, what does that really look like? What does it sound like? So we're thinking about supports or building blocks or stepping stones for them to be able to access the material that we're teaching in class. So if you think of it in like oral supports, like paraphrasing a text that you're reading, or providing essential phrases for them in order to communicate their needs. Wait time is really, really big. You have to give them that time to process the question asked and then process their answer. I like sometimes if you have students who really, really want to participate, to provide the questions ahead of time so that they can think about them and then think about their answers so that they are ready when you're talking about it in class, or giving them the opportunity to write it on a Post-it note so that they have their words ready to go, so that when they're tense and not comfortable speaking in front of the class, they can go back to their Post-it note and be, oh yeah, this was my answer. And they're rephrasing their statements, which allows them to hear the correct version of what they were communicating. So you may be adding plural ending, or you may be correcting the verb tense, just so that they hear those pieces of language that are really important.
And our primary classrooms are great examples of the oral. I find if you're a primary teacher, you're probably already doing a lot of this.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I had a student actually do it to me in Spanish today because I used the wrong verb tense, and then he looked at me and he just rephrased it for me, and I'm like, okay, thank you. That's what I needed. Procedural supports. So like when you're teaching in the classroom, you're already doing this. You're modeling activities. Providing visuals really, really helps. We'll talk about porcupines or skunks, and some of our children have never seen a porcupine or a skunk. So giving them that picture so that they know what it is you're talking about. Turning and talking to each other before you ask for responses to a question is wonderful, because it lets them build that vocabulary that they need to talk about what it is that you're talking about in class. And then the working with a partner, that we do it and then you can do it independently. And then my favorite are sentence frames. We're going to get to a few of those, and graphic organizers for when they're working on written work. And then modeling thinking and pre-teaching the vocabulary, because they're going to need that vocabulary multiple times in multiple ways in order to consolidate what it is that word means in each context.
Good job. That's what I was going to say.
Oh, sorry.
No, we're on the same page.
So we have, sorry,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I like these visuals, the sentence stems and the sentence frames.
Yeah, and so we often think about sentence stems and sentence frames in terms of language, but they are so powerful in your content subjects for all of your children, because they provide that structure of language so that students know what it is that they need to communicate to you. Especially if we're looking at like the history, so-and-so wanted, but, or the differences between and are, right? So giving them those pieces of language so that they can fill it in with the information that they know from the contents. Mm-hmm. So, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, when we first had this slide, you were just talking about how some people just think as our graphic organizers, that typical one we always see, but there's many, many different ones that you can use and will help organize the children's thoughts. And even they can draw pictures here too as well, which helps them.
That's the thing, right? Is that there's so many options with the graphic organizers that just help them get their ideas out and organize information. Like I really like them in terms of science and social studies for thinking about things like cause and effect, or writing instructions, or using a glossary. Like all of those things can all be scaffolded with graphic organizers.
Right. And letting them use their first language. I know you hear this all the time, but it's so important. We have kids using, that's how they get their ideas down, and then we can build from there.
But just to brainstorm in the language that you feel really comfortable in is so much easier. And then you can take that and use tools to help you put it into your second or third or fourth language that you're working in. It's so important.
So modifications are made on a case-by-case basis. Every kid is different. Like we know this in teaching. So, and if it doesn't work, we change it. None of these modifications, it's not like an IEP, there's not written down, even though those are changing as well. So modifications for ELLs include grade level content, but can change the number of complexity in the expectation.
So we're reducing the language for our ELL students, right? So that they can access the content that we're teaching at grade level, but then reducing how much English is required in order to complete the work.
And some will need below. They may temporarily need supports under, under grade level, and that's okay too. We'll give them this again. We'll scaffold for them, give them the tools that they need to get there, and they will get there.
And also in terms of our math, right? We have a continuum in math to look at the skills, so we can look at the skills that they need, so that we can put those skills in place in order to build on them, so that we can bring them up to grade level. But yes, absolutely. Sometimes we're going to need to go back, especially if we're looking at literacy or math. Those pieces might be below grade level while they are acquiring those skills.
Right.
So we have some examples of what this actually looks like in classrooms in our board right now. We've had some wonderful teachers share some of their materials with us. So we'll just talk a little bit about some of the things that we have here, some of the artifacts. And if you have questions afterwards, please feel free to email us, or we can happily share more about what it is that these teachers are doing. So this visual is helpful in thinking about what accommodations and modifications might look like in terms of your expectations. So I've given you a science expectation and a social studies expectation, and then we've showed you how it is accommodated and then how it is modified.
The next one.
Okay. All right, so this is a step 1 student in grade 2. So these are some of the accommodations and modifications that might be happening in the classroom. We have literacy activities, and in many of our primary rooms, guided reading is happening, and that is accommodated for everybody. Everybody's working at a text at their own level. But then you also may need to work on specific skills, including recognizing alphabet letters, the alphabet sounds. We like lots and lots of visuals to help them access things. And then, as Teresa mentioned earlier, listening to texts. So we have a couple of options for them to listen to text, and then there are other options available online where they can go and listen to texts being read. We really like Unite for Literacy. It's a wonderful resource for kids with the dual language texts, and your English-speaking students might also enjoy listening to the books in another language. It can be an eye-opening experience for them.
And we just did that in an FDK class this week. Or was it this week? It was last week. We played a video in Vietnamese. They had it, they were from Vietnam, and the kids, the kindergarten kids didn't know. We put it in Vietnamese first and asked the students the question, what was their favorite animal? And the two little twins, they went up and pointed at the animals that they preferred. They sat down and we asked the Canadian speakers, what just happened? And they didn't know. So we played it in English. And they were like, oh, that's so neat. And it was really, they were trying to mimic and copy. So it was good to put, give a voice to our Vietnamese speakers. So it was neat for the Canadian speakers to see it.
Some of our kindergartens have also done mystery readers, where they have parents come in and read a book in the first language, and the kids find it fascinating. Some of the parents were like, well, they won't understand. And we explained, well, they can use the pictures and they can use your intonation of your voice. And the parents have had a wonderful time reading the stories in their first language. It's been super fun. This was a step 1, grade 5. The student just arrived from Mexico in September. So this is what things might look like in grade 5. Again, you're going to notice that there's going to be less produced for this child while he is acquiring English. We're working on good language structures. We're working on making sure he has the vocabulary to effectively use the language that he's using. The French teacher there also speaks Spanish. So instead of going French to English to Spanish, we're going directly from French to Spanish for him to work in, which has been wonderful for him. And again, we have adapted texts. We have some phonics and phonemic awareness work. The visual schedule is in dual languages and provides visuals. And then she does journaling every day where the prompt is in English and in Spanish. And then he uses translation tools to help him write short paragraphs about what it is that he's been doing or whatever the prompt is for that activity.
Cool. Oh, here's, we have students, sisters in a grade 7-8 class at one of our schools, and we've been using the Microsoft Translator, which has been so cool. The teacher is presenting the math lesson in English, and it translates to them in Arabic, and they're able to follow along. So some of this, that was where the translation tool came into place.
Yeah, so this is the Microsoft Translator that we're talking about. It's an app that you can download or you can run it on your desktop. And it translates onto the user's device in written form. So students can listen to the lesson while reading the content in their first language to help understand what it is that the lesson is actually teaching. And then the teacher can go back and then work with those students on the English pieces for that lesson. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then also, Teresa, you've got a couple of pieces of writing here where they've worked in the first language, correct?
Right, yep.
And then
we're, we used another app, Snap and Translate, to work. We go back into English, and it's not perfect by any means, but it gives them, these kids are working at grade level. So it's wonderful to see, to let them write into the curriculum and let them be working at grade level. So it's been wonderful. It's been helpful. And they're so excited to be participating and be learning. And even with that translator app, with the Microsoft Translator, they're able to speak in Arabic to us. And then it translates that to English so we can understand what they're asking. So it's been a game changer for us.
Mm-hmm. We really like adapted texts. We have the Big Ideas texts as our department that we can share both electronically and on paper. But having those highly visual adapted texts for these step 1 students and step 2 students at the higher grades are quite helpful. And then closed passages, sentence frames, and sentence stems, again, are a great way for them to build that language structure and use the new vocabulary that they are learning while also demonstrating their understanding of the content. So I just talked about these books. We have these, and if you would like the electronic logins, please send us an email and we will share them with you so that you can use them with your kids in your class. They are absolutely also wonderful for so many more students than just our English language learners. They are bright, they are visual, they have activities built in to the book so that as you're working through the book, there are activities that you can assign to the students can work through, and then you can assess for their understanding of the content. So we really do like these, so make sure to reach out to us if you would like to use those in your room.
Oh, sorry, that was the same
That's
question.
Okay.
So we're assessing them based on the modified expectation. Assessments can be oral, drawing, first language, gestures. I just did an initial assessment with a student, and it was they had it described as soccer player, and I said, "Who's the man in the black and white outfit?" And the little boy didn't know the word for referee, but he whistled, and he was like trying to tell me, "Oh, he's the guy who whistles." So I understood, he understood, but it was gesturing that got us through that question. Mm-hmm. Right. So don't forget, there's videos and auto recordings. Technology can be our friend. I mean, there's always a place for it. Yeah, there's also not a place for it, but in this situation there is.
Absolutely. And the assessment doesn't have to look the same as everybody else is doing.
No.
There are so many ways that you can collect data. Don't feel that you have to have that piece of paper or that Google Classroom piece of work. you can absolutely have a conversation with this child and assess their understanding of the content subject, or have them draw and label. Those are all valid forms of assessment for these students while they're acquiring English. I have some report card comments here that I created, and then I just pointed out the accommodations and modifications that were used and how I worded them. So you can come back after the fact and have another look at these if you would like. Remember, if you are modifying for your English language learners, you have to check the box on the progress report or on the report card. That just indicates that you have modified the program from the curriculum expectations at grade level. And
only if you're modifying.
Only if you're modifying.
If you're an ELL student and you're not modifying, you're just accommodating, you do not check the box. And that's our biggest question, I think, this time.
Yeah, and there's no statement, because there is a statement at the bottom of the report card that explains that this checkbox has been checked. It is important that you're communicating to parents that they are working on modified expectations, but there is no official statement that goes at the beginning of the report card at this time. So this is our Twitter information if you want to find us on Twitter, and we absolutely want you to reach out to us. We will come and work with your student. We will come and work with you. We will help you plan. We will team teach. We will do all kinds of things to help you support your English language learners in the class. Every student is different, so it's really hard to blanket apply a set of modifications or accommodations. But as you get to know your students better, you'll know what it is that they need in order to reach the next step. Just so you know, all of our resources are located on the portal page. We are updating it regularly. There's a couple of videos on there from our YouTube channel on all of the acronyms, ESL, ELD, ELL. We also have a bunch of websites that we really like to use. We have the STEP ELL Continuum that you can download on there. So make sure to check out the portal page if you have any other things that you're looking for. Thanks everybody for coming out today.
Thank you.
Thanks, ladies. That was awesome.
So